To welcome to the stage the art director of Final Fantasy XIII and Final Fantasy XIII-2, Isamu Kamikokuryo, and the art director of Deus Ex Human Revolution, Jonathan Jacques Beltet. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks.
Let's begin our discussion by looking at the key characteristics of game artwork in the East and West. Isamu, what do you think are the main differences between Eastern and Western art styles and art direction in video games?
そうですね。今日は皆さんの前で話していただけるのをすごく楽しみにしてきました。質問の答えなんですけど、そうですね。日本のゲームっていうのはすごくその世界観をオリジナルで構築するっていうところにすごくなんていうか執着があって、やっぱり誰も見たことのない世界観っていうのを想像するっていうところにすごく、あとはやっぱり独特のキャラクター性というか、やっぱり日本のやっぱりゲームっていうのはやっぱり過去に作られたいわゆるジャパニーズアニメーションであるとかジャパニーズコミック、もちろんそのゲームっていうのもそうなんですけど、そういうものをずっと今のクリエイターっていうのは見て育ってきて、そういったものから受けた影響っていうのは本当にすごく大きいんじゃないかなって思ってます。同じように西洋のゲームアートっていうのはやっぱりアメリカンコミックであったり、あとやっぱり長い歴史の上で作られてきた映画とかハリウッドの映画とかそういったところの本当にガジェットであるとかインダストリアルデザインであるとか、そういうすごく説得力のある現実に基づいたそういったものを見て育って、そこから受けた影響がすごく強く出ているなっていうふうに思います。
So, first of all, I'd like to say that I'm very happy to be here today. I was looking forward to speaking to you all. And to answer the question, the Japanese art style very much is about envisioning a world that no one's ever seen before. And of course, being from Japan, I think all of as Japanese artists, have a very strong influence from anime and manga that we all grew up being very familiar with because it's part of our culture. So from that, we draw influences and create new worlds and environments. As for Western art styles, I think that the same can be said, except their influences are graphic novels and movies, and it really pursues realism and it's very convincing to look at.
Thank you. I mean, Jonathan, would you agree with that? I mean, how's your art style formed?
Well, yeah, I very much agree with what Isamu just said. I think that it's totally true that the Japanese kind of art direction or visual style in their games is kind of always about creating a world from scratch, almost like creating something that's never been seen before, like Isamu just described. I think in the West we're a lot more about, trying to make simulations or, trying to kind of like tell the story of something that already happens and stuff like that. Like most of the games, maybe not most of the games, but I think it's a little rarer that we create a world entirely from scratch and present it to you through the game itself. So that's I absolutely agree with that. I would say for me though, I think the main difference is that in the West we strive a lot for photorealism. There seems to be this thing where we need to try to make the characters look as as real as possible, and I think the Japanese and for the environments as well, and I think the Japanese games industry doesn't care as much for these things. I think what they care about is the credibility of the characters, but not necessarily if they look like real human beings, if they're going to try to fool your brain into thinking that you're looking at a real person. I think that's definitely one of the main differences. And also, just like Isamu said, there's like a main style, and it's almost like a cultural style in Japan, which is based on their anime culture, their manga culture, and stuff like that. And obviously, there's different categories, there's different like aesthetic categories in that global cultural style. But overall, it gives like a very even and homogeneous kind of visual direction to their products. And in North America or in the West, we don't have such a strong kind of cultural global direction for art. So products are a little more different from one another, visually speaking and stuff like that. And it's, yeah, just like Isamu said, I think in the West, it's a lot about taking real world events and making a game about it, where, in the East, it's about, let's just, create an entirely new world. And something that I find very interesting as well is kind of like, in Japan, they don't, I don't want to say, it's not that they don't care, not in any way, that's not what I mean, but the tech is almost secondary. Like, they know they can make nice art without technology, and that it's like two separate things. If you look at their characters, because I think they make characters much better, visually speaking, than we do in the West. If you look at their characters, like on PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2, they look as good and as well made as they are now on the 360 or PlayStation 3. Making good proportions, making good animations, making good character designs, and making them feel nice on the screen has nothing to do with tech. And I think this is something that Japanese understand very, very well. And I think that in the West, we cater too much to the tech in order to try, we use it as a crutch almost to try to make our characters always better and better, where I think the tech is just a tool. It's like a pencil, you know what I mean? If you don't know how to draw, you give someone a pencil who doesn't know how to draw, he's not gonna know what to do with a pencil. I think tech is the same thing. And in the West, we rely on it too much when the foundation is a little weaker sometimes. So I think these are the main differences, yeah.
Got it. Well, Jonathan, we talked a lot about how you've been a fan of video games your whole life and very much wanted to get into the industry, and now you're in it at a very high level. Given that Japanese games have been so significant a part of Western video game culture, how do you think the Japanese game industry has influenced the West artistically?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's a hard one to answer, actually. Maybe if I look at what I wrote. Again, I think there's stuff that cannot really be imported. Again, like that almost cultural style that I was talking about. Everything that comes from anime and manga. I think these are things that 100% belong to the Japanese, and you can't really import this. You can't try to do this and stuff like that.
Do you see that though in some of your younger designers, like people who are coming up today? Because like manga and anime are very much an influence among people younger than ourselves.
True.
So are you starting to see that in some of the portfolios of things that are coming into
it's interesting what you're saying there. It's almost like if you look at what Europeans do, because the Europeans are kind of like in the middle, right? It's like there's North America and there's Japan, and they've always had both influences. And if you look at their art, even at European Day, which is like for comic books, or if you look at what they're doing now, it's almost as if it's got a bit of of both. And I think now in North America, the portfolios that I'm seeing is starting to look a bit like European art in the sense that I think they're starting to get that influence from the West, and it mixes with influence from the East. Sorry, it mixes with the Eastern influences, and we're starting to see like more colors, more vibrant colors. Characters are a little more stylized and stuff like that. And yeah, definitely. But I think that we can't import their pure style. But what we can do is look at the recipe, which is to make characters that are not photorealistic, that are stylized, and that are always done in the same kind of homogeneous look. And we can look at this recipe, try to make it into a formula, and do it with a North American kind of aesthetic. And like, for example, like an artist from the 50s that I've always admired, his name is Andrew Loomis, and he pretty much invented, if you look at the comic books from the 50s and the 60s, that style of drawing, he's the one who invented it. And to me, that's a good example of Western art that has the same characteristics of Japanese art in terms of like the simplicity of the lines, the simplicity of the anatomy, but that's still very, very well done, but yet with a look that Americans or Canadians or whatnot can relate to. And to me, that's something that we can use while being influenced by the Japanese art style.
Isamu, where do you see Japanese video games being influenced by Western video games in terms of art? And where do you see areas where it's kind of like a pretty firm line and there isn't really an influence?
影響はもう本当に大きいと思います。それも年々大きくなっているっていうふうに考えてます。そうですね、僕自身もこの業界に入ってデザイナーを始めて10年以上経つんですけど、やっぱりこうさっきも言ったようにまずはなんていうんですかね、独自のスタイルの世界観であったりキャラクター性であったりっていうところをまずはイメージするんですけど、本当になんていうんですか、技術的な進化でものすごく下手したら現実のものよりもリアルに表現できるようになってきてて、でそういったところで自分たちが生み出したオリジナルのいろんなものたちを説得力を持ってユーザーに伝えるためには本当にやっぱり西洋の作品のようにもう本当にすごく実際の例えば「スター・ウォーズ」とかっていうのに代表されるような過去の映画のアートワークであったり現在のゲームのアートワークであったりすごく現実の実際にある建築であったりデザインであったりもう本当に人間がずっと長い年月を経て積み重ねてきた本当にある存在っていうのをすごく作品の中に再現してそういったところをすごく僕らも目の当たりにしてすごくもういつも驚いてるんですけどそういったところと頭の中から出てくる発想力っていうのを融合してそこで何か化学変化が起きて、ものができていくっていうふうに考えてます。
So each year, I'm definitely seeing more and more of an influence from the Western art style, and I've been in this industry for over 10 years, and I've been able to develop my own style, whether it be characters or environment, but with the advancement in the technology that's available to us, it's almost as if we can create something that is even more realistic than real, and it's getting to a point where the Japanese games are having an influence to basically get close to that convincing realism that the Western games tend to do really well. Like something like even Star Wars, which came out decades ago, but still it was so convincing and real, and that is continuously what the Western style is very strong with, is that convincing element where you see it and you just think that this is an existing real environment, or these people really do exist, and that's definitely an influence that we respect and we would like to continue to expand upon as well.
Sam, I'd like to ask you the same question that I asked Jonathan. When you get portfolios from new artists and younger artists within your company, what do you see in their work, and where do you see them drawing influences from?
そうですね、今ジョナさんの話を聞いて僕もちょっと そうなんだっていうふうに思ったんですけど、確かにそういったクリエイターが、まさに彼がそうだと僕は思ってるんですよ。でこれからもどんどん出てくると思うし、